Arif was the type of person who rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. He worked in a big textile factory on the edge of the city, a place filled with noise from spinning machines and weaving looms. Every day, hundreds of workers came and went, each one doing their job as the fabric moved down the production line. Most people in the factory hardly noticed Arif. He kept his head down, worked carefully, and did not get involved in the gossip or jokes that always floated around the break room. But if anyone ever watched closely, they would see that Arif's eyes were always moving, always thinking. Arif's job was to operate one of the older weaving machines. This machine was loud and sometimes stubborn. It had been in the factory longer than most of the workers, and it had a personality of its own. Many people disliked working with it because it would break down at the worst times, usually during the busiest hours, right when a big order needed to be finished. The floor manager, Mr. Hader, always seemed tense on those days, shouting over the clatter of the machines, trying to get everything back on track. The workers, especially the younger ones, liked to make fun of the old weaving machine, calling it Grandpa or the dinosaur. They also liked to joke about Arif, saying he must talk to the machine in his sleep. One Tuesday, everything seemed normal at first. The morning shift started, the machines roared to life, and people were moving quickly up and down the aisles. Suddenly, a loud grinding noise echoed through the building. Everyone stopped. Workers turned their heads. There it was again. The old weaving machine had stopped dead in the middle of a run, and a flashing red light glowed on its panel. Some of the workers sighed, others grumbled. They knew this would mean trouble. Mr. Hader stormed over, frowning, waving his clipboard in the air. He called for the maintenance team. They tried to check the machine, pulling out tools, turning bolts, but nothing worked. Each time they tried to restart it, the same grinding noise came, then silence. The production line was held up, and people started to get nervous. If they could not fix the machine quickly, the whole factory would fall behind on its orders, and everyone's day would get longer. As the workers waited, a few of them gathered around Arif. "Why don't you go talk to Grandpa again?" one of the younger guys teased. "Maybe he'll listen to you." Ref smiled, but did not say much. He just watched as the maintenance team kept trying, their faces growing more and more frustrated. He could tell that something was wrong with the machine's body, but maybe with its mind. Arif had always been good at listening, not just to people, but to the machines he worked with. He believed every sound, every shake. Every strange smell was a message. After nearly an hour, the maintenance team gave up. "We need to call the company technician," one of them said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Can't open up. The whole engine today, it'll take hours, maybe even days." Mr. Hader looked worried. Orders were already piling up. The workers had nothing to do but wait. That's when Mr. Hader spotted Arif standing quietly near the machine. He shook his head and tried to lighten the mood, even though he was frustrated. With a half laugh, he called out, "Arif, if you can fix this engine without even touching it, I'll double your pay." He said it as a joke, expecting everyone to laugh with him. Some of the workers did. A few even clapped Arif on the back. "Go on, magician. Show us your tricks." But Arif didn't laugh or get upset. He just nodded. "Let me try," he said in his calm, soft voice. People stared at him, some surprised, some curious. Was he serious? Could he actually fix the old weaving machine without even touching it? Mr. Hader was about to wave him away, but then shrugged. After all, nothing else had worked, and he could use a little entertainment while they waited for the technician. Arif walked over to the machine, but he didn't pick up a single tool. Instead, he pulled a small notebook from his pocket and a pencil. He sat down on a wooden crate near the machine and just listened. The rest of the factory went back to work, but a few workers kept watching. Arif closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to hear something no one else could. Then he opened his notebook and started to write. He listened to the sounds the machine made when it tried to start. He watched how the lights flashed on the control panel. He looked at the way. The threads were jammed, and the pattern the fabric had stopped in. Every detail was important to him, even the smell of oil and burnt dust coming from the engine's vents. Arif believed machines tried to tell you what was wrong if you were patient enough to listen. as Arif sat there. The workers began to whisper. Some made jokes about him writing poetry to the weaving machine. Others were actually curious after all. Arif had a reputation for knowing things about the old machines that nobody else did. Once, he had fixed a different loom just by tightening a single screw, saving hours of work. But this was something different. This time, the boss had set a challenge: fix the engine without touching it. Mr. Hader watched from his office window, still half amused. He liked Arif, but he did not believe the man could solve this problem, especially not without opening the machine or using any tools. Still, a small part of him hoped for a miracle. The orders needed to go out, and every minute lost was costing the company money after about half an hour. Arif got up and walked over to a few of the machine operators who used the loom on different shifts. He asked them simple questions. When did you first notice the grinding noise? No. Did you see any warning lights before the machine stopped? Has anyone changed anything on the control panel lately? The workers shrugged, but a few remembered that a technician had come last week and made some adjustments to the software. Another worker remembered a short power outage 2 nights ago that had reset some of the machines. Arif went back to his notebook, thinking hard. He didn't need to open the engine or take apart the machine. He believed the problem was not in the machine's moving parts, but somewhere in the electronic brain that controlled it. Arif stared at the control panel for a long time, pressing a few buttons to look at the error codes and settings, even though he hadn't touched the engine itself. Arif's careful watching and listening began to make sense of the mystery. The rest of the workers began to notice that Arif was not just wasting time. He had a purpose. Some of them stopped joking and started paying attention, wondering if Arif really could do what the boss had joked about. The factory, usually full of noise and movement, felt a little different that day. There was a quiet sense of hope mixed with doubt. People started to believe, just a little, that maybe something unexpected was about to happen. Mr. Hader watched as Arif scribbled in his notebook, checked the control panel, and quietly gathered information. The challenge had begun as a joke, but now everyone was waiting to see if Arif, the quiet man with sharp eyes and a listening ear, could solve the puzzle of the stubborn old weaving machine without even laying a hand on it. Arif sat quietly near the weaving machine, notebook in hand, as the noise of the factory continued all around him. He was in his own world, carefully watching every small detail, every light on the control panel, and listening to the machine's quiet sounds that most people ignored. While others thought his methods were strange, Arif trusted his way. He believed that patience and close attention could often solve the biggest problems, even when everyone else had given up. The workers went back to their jobs, but many of them kept glancing at Arif. The joke about fixing the machine without touching it was still on their minds. Some expected him to fail, while others felt a quiet hope that he might actually do something amazing. The boss, Mr. Hader, tried to look busy in his office, but he was really just watching Arif out of the corner of his eye, wondering what the quiet man was thinking. As Arif sat, he began to notice small things that did not seem right. The weaving machine would try to start, but the sound was just a soft clicking, not the usual deep rumble. The lights on the control panel flashed in a pattern that seemed strange, almost like the machine was trying to say something. Arif leaned closer and watched the display screen. He could see error codes blinking, but they changed every few seconds, like the machine was confused. He wrote down everything in his notebook, drawing little diagrams and writing numbers. Or if each code and sound was a clue. Remembered that one of the workers had said something about a technician updating the machine's software last week. Another worker talked about the power outage. Arif wondered if these two events could be connected. He knew that sometimes a sudden power cut could reset machines or even damage their electronic memories, instead of rushing to fix anything. Arif decided to talk to more people. He walked over to the break room, where 2 of the older workers, Bashir and Naveed, were having tea. "Did you notice anything strange before the machine stopped working?" Arif asked politely. Bashir scratched his chin. "Well, I did notice that after the power outage, the machine was acting funny. The panel was slow and it kept asking for a password I never used before. I just waited until it worked again." Naveed nodded. "And last night, the machine stopped twice for no reason. I had to restart it from the panel both times." Maybe something is wrong with the controls, not the engine. Arif thanked them and returned to the machine. He now felt sure that the problem was not inside the heavy engine, but in the electronic controls. He stared at the control panel and saw a small sticker on the side with a number for the machine's software support. He wrote it down, just in case he needed to ask for help. Back at the machine, RF pressed a few buttons and entered the maintenance menu. Most workers didn't know about this menu, but RF had read the manual several times. The screen showed him a list of errors. One of them was about parameter out of range. RF remembered that when someone updates software or resets a machine, they sometimes forget to set the control values correctly. He did not touch the engine, but he checked each parameter on the control panel. Comparing the numbers to the ones he had in his notebook, it was slow work, but Arif was patient. As he moved through the menu, he found one value that seemed much higher than the rest. He wondered if someone had entered it by mistake during the last service. People started to notice Arif was doing something different. He was not opening the machine or using any tools, just thinking, watching, and checking things from the control side. The younger workers stopped making jokes and instead stood a little closer, curious to see what would happen next. Suddenly, Arif had an idea. He went to the main office and asked if he could use the old machine logbooks. Mr. Hayter was surprised, but handed them over. "If you think it'll help, take them," he said. Arif flipped through the pages, looking for any notes about past problems with the machine. He found a record from 2 months ago about a similar error after a software update. The solution, written in small handwriting, was to reset the control values to their factory settings. Arif felt a surge of hope. He returned to the machine, checked the current settings one more time, and then used the menu to reset everything back to default. The machine screen flickered and the lights flashed. The workers held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. But the machine did not start immediately. Instead, a warning popped up. Calibration required. Arif smiled. This was progress. The machine had recognized its own problem and was now asking for help. He carefully followed the on-screen instructions, moving through the steps for calibration. It was a slow process and required pressing different buttons, checking the alignment, and waiting as the machine tested itself. Through all this, Arif never touched the engine or any mechanical parts. He was solving the problem from the outside, using only his mind and his patience. The workers watched quietly now, some whispering about how smart Arif was, others just hoping the machine would finally start. As Arif worked, Mr. Hayter came over, trying to look calm. "Any luck?" he asked, though his voice was tense. "I think so, sir," Arif replied. "It's not the engine, it's the software. So the machine just needs to remember who it is." The calibration finished, and Arif pressed the button to restart the machine. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the engine came to life. The noise was different, smooth and steady, just like when the machine was new. The fabric began to move down the line again, perfectly woven, as if nothing had happened at all. The workers cheered and clapped. Mr. Hayter's eyes widened in disbelief. "You did it," he said quietly. "And you never even touched the engine." Arif just smiled, turned to the workers and said, "Sometimes you just have to listen." People began to talk excitedly, telling each other that Arif had fixed the machine in a way no one had seen before. The factory, which had felt heavy with worry all morning, was now full of energy and laughter. Mr. Hayter was still in shock. He remembered his own words about doubling Arif's pay if he fixed the machine without touching it. Oh, he knew. Everyone else remembered too. As the day went on, the story spread across the factory floor. Workers from other sections came to look at the old weaving machine and to see Arif. Some wanted to know how he had done it. Others just wanted to shake his hand. For the first time, Arif was the center of attention, not because of jokes or because he was quiet, but because he had saved the day with his careful mind and calm heart. Still, Arif did not act proud or loud. He went back to his work, just as before, but now people greeted him with smiles and respect. Mr. Hayter, too, watched Arif with new eyes. He realized there was much more to this quiet worker than anyone had thought. As the shift ended and the machines quieted down, Arif sat with his notebook, writing down everything that had happened. He did not need applause or rewards. For him, the real prize was knowing he had solved a difficult problem and brought the factory back to life. Without touching a single part of the stubborn old engine. But deep down, he wondered what the boss would do next after all. A promise had been made, even if it started as a joke. The rest of the workers wondered too, and waited to see if Arif's patience and clever thinking would finally be rewarded. Ask ChatGPT. After the weaving machine started working again, there was a strange energy across the whole factory. Everyone was talking about Arif. People were excited, telling and retelling the story about how the quiet man fixed the stubborn machine without touching the engine, just by using his mind and understanding the machine's heart. Even people who worked in other departments heard about it and came by to see if the old weaving machine was really running, which was the fabric coming out was smooth and perfect. As the day continued, Arif kept a low profile, felt a little shy from all the attention, but he was happy inside. He watched the machine, listening carefully to the soft, steady rhythm. He wrote down notes about the settings he had changed and the steps he took to recalibrate the machine. Arif wanted to make sure there was a record for the future, so no one would have to guess if the machine acted strange again. The other workers were now looking at Arif with respect. Some of the younger guys who used to tease him now asked him questions, wanting to learn how he figured out the problem. One of them, a tall boy named Samir, followed Arif around during the break. "How did you know it was the software, not the engine?" he asked. Arif smiled and explained patiently. "When you work with machines for a long time, you start to hear the difference in their sounds. If the engine was broken, there would be grinding or knocking. But the engine was quiet, only the panel was blinking and the controls were confused. Machines can't speak, but they show you what they feel." Samir nodded, thinking about Arif's words. A few others joined in, asking more questions. And soon Arif was quietly teaching a small group how to read the machine's signals. It was something he enjoyed. He believed that anyone could learn if they paid attention. In the afternoon, Mr. Hyder, the boss, called a meeting in the main office. He invited Arif, the maintenance team, and some senior workers. Mr. Hyder looked more serious than usual. Everyone sat around a long table, and there was a nervous silence. Mr. Hyder started by saying, "We all saw what happened this morning. The weaving machine was out of order, and we almost lost a full day of work. Our orders are safe now, thanks to Arif." He turned to Arif with a look that was half proud and half embarrassed. "You fixed the machine in a way none of us expected. I want you to tell us, step by step, what you did." Arif wasn't used to speaking in front of a group, but he did his best. He opened his notebook and explained how he listened to the machine, checked the panel, and talked to the workers. He described how he found the wrong control value and the steps he took to reset the settings and recalibrate everything. The maintenance team listened carefully. They realized that sometimes they worked too fast and didn't notice small details. One of the maintenance men, an older man named Yusuf, said we should all learn to be more patient and to listen. Like Arif, maybe next time we'll catch the problem before it gets worse. The meeting ended, and everyone left with something new to think about. Mr. Hayter, however, looked a little uncomfortable. He remembered what he had said earlier, that Deyes promised to double Arif's pay if he fixed the engine without touching it. At the time, it was just a joke to lighten the mood. But now, everyone in the factory had heard it. The story was spreading fast, and many workers were already whispering about whether the boss would keep his word. Later that afternoon, Arif went back to his work. He was content. He didn't expect a reward. For him, the important thing was that the machine was running and the factory was back on track. But his friends and co-workers thought differently. They believed Arif deserved something special. After all, he had saved everyone from a long and difficult day. A few of the older workers, including Bashir and Naveed, talked quietly in the break room. The boss made a promise, Naveed said. He should keep it. It's about respect. Bashir agreed. Arif never asks for anything, but he's always there to help. He deserves this. Some of the younger workers decided to support Arif too. They began talking to each other, saying that if the boss didn't keep his promise, it wouldn't be fair. Word spread quickly. By the end of the shift, almost everyone in the factory was talking about Arif and the promise of double pay. When the day ended, Arif walked home with a light heart. He lived in a small apartment nearby, and he enjoyed the peaceful walk after a long shift. On the way, he thought about the machine, his coworkers, and how strange it felt to be at the center of so much attention. He knew that tomorrow would bring more questions, and maybe, just maybe, an answer from Mr. Hader about the promise. That night, Mr. Hader couldn't sleep well. He kept thinking about what had happened in the factory. He knew that his workers respected him, but he also knew they were watching. If he broke his promise, they might lose trust in him. If he kept his promise, it would cost more money, but it might build a stronger team. He wondered what the right thing to do was. The next morning, the factory was buzzing with excitement before the first shift even started. People gathered in small groups, talking quietly about Arif. Some workers from the night shift stayed late just to see what would happen. Arif arrived as usual, just before the start of his shift. He smiled at his friends, waved to Bashir and Navid, and started his morning check of the machines. Suddenly, Mr. Hader called everyone together on the factory floor. He stood on a small platform and cleared his throat. The factory grew quiet. All eyes were on him. "I want to talk about what happened yesterday," Mr. Hader began. "Arif did something special, something none of us expected. He fixed the weaving machine without touching the engine, just as I joked. I said I would double his pay if he could do it. At the time, it was just a joke. But Arif proved that nothing is impossible if you use your mind." There was a murmur of agreement from the workers. Mr. Hader continued. "I want you all to know that I respect hard work, clever thinking, and teamwork. A promise, even a joke, should be kept. So, I am proud to say that starting today, Arif's pay will be doubled." The factory exploded with applause and cheers. People smiled, clapped Arif on the back, and celebrated together. Arif felt a wave of happiness and pride, but also humility. He thanked Mr. Hader and his coworkers, and promised to keep working hard and helping others. Mr. Hader shook Arif's hand. "You taught us all a lesson, Arif," he said. "Sometimes, the best tools are not in your hands, but in your mind and your heart." From that day, the factory felt different. Workers treated each other with more respect, listened to each other's ideas, and tried to learn from Arif's example. Even the old weaving machine seemed happier, running smoothly as if it knew it was in good hands. AIF's story spread beyond the factory walls. People from other factories heard about what had happened and came to visit, hoping to meet the quiet man who fixed a machine with patience and wisdom. For Arif, life didn't change much. He still walked to work each morning, still carried his notebook, and still listened more than he spoke. But now when people saw him, they didn't just see a quiet worker. They saw a hero, a man who had saved the day not with his hands, but with his heart and mind. And as the days passed, the workers remembered the lesson. Sometimes the smallest voice and the quietest worker have the biggest ideas and the strongest hearts. Arif never forgot the power of listening, patience, and believing that every problem has a solution if you pay close attention and never give up. After Mr. Hader's big announcement on the factory floor, everyone's spirits were lifted. Arif was now a hero in the eyes of his coworkers. He didn't ask for special treatment, but the respect was impossible to miss. People nodded at him. In the halls, asked his opinion on small problems. And even some who never spoke to him before now greeted him with a friendly smile. But with the good changes, there were also a few unexpected problems. Some of the older workers, especially those who had been in the factory longer than Arif, felt a bit jealous. They had always done their jobs the traditional way, using their hands, their strength, and the old methods they trusted. It bothered them that Arif had become so important by doing something no one else had thought of. One afternoon, as Arif sat eating his lunch in a quiet corner, two of the older men, Salman and Tariq, walked over. They sat down without asking, and for a few minutes, there was silence. Arif looked up, waiting for them to speak. Salman finally said, "You know, Arif, When I started here, there were no fancy control panels or software. We fixed everything with our hands. Now, it seems like machines are getting smarter and people are getting lazy." Arif listened politely. He understood their feelings. Change was hard for everyone, especially for those who had worked for many years the same way. He tried to find the right words. "I respect what you've done. I learned a lot by watching you all these years. But every machine, even the oldest one, has a mind inside it now. We have to learn new things or we get left behind." Tariq shook his head, but smiled a little. "Maybe you're right. But it's not easy for us to ask for help from someone younger. You showed us something new. That's a good thing, I suppose."
After that day,
Arif made it a point to help the older workers even more. If they had a problem with the new machines or the computers, he showed them slowly, step by step, never making them feel embarrassed. In the evenings, he stayed late to explain how the control panels worked, how to read error codes, and even how to reset settings if something went wrong. It took time, but soon even the most stubborn workers started to trust him. Mr. Hadir noticed the new spirit on the factory floor. He saw workers talking together in small groups, sharing tips, and laughing more than before. He was glad that his promise to Arif had made a difference, not just for one man, but for the whole team. He called Arif into his office one afternoon, offering him tea. "You've changed this place," Mr. Hader said. "People work together better now. They listen to each other, and they aren't afraid to ask questions. I want to thank you for that." Arif felt a little embarrassed by the praise. "I didn't do it alone, sir. Everyone here helped me. I just showed them what I knew." Hadar leaned forward. "Still, it takes courage to be different. When you fixed that engine without touching it, you showed us something important. I want to give you more responsibility. Would you be willing to help train new workers? Maybe even lead a small group to help fix problems with the machines?" Arif was surprised. He had never thought about being a leader. He enjoyed solving problems quietly, without much attention. But now he saw an opportunity, not just for himself, but to make the factory even better. He agreed, and Mr. Hader promised to arrange some training sessions. Word spread quickly. Workers who struggled with technology started to feel more confident. Arif became the go-to person for tricky problems. Even workers from other departments came to him with questions about their machines. Arif was patient with everyone, never rushing or making fun of someone who didn't understand right away. Meanwhile, the story of Arif's unusual repair traveled. Outside the factory, one day a reporter from a local newspaper came by. She wanted to write an article about how the factory had avoided disaster because of one man's clever thinking. She asked Arif how he knew what to do. Arif explained, "I just listened to the machine. Machines have a language. They talk through lights, sounds, and small changes. If you pay attention, you can hear what they're telling you." The reporter smiled and wrote her story. When it appeared in the newspaper, Arif's family was so proud. His children brought the paper to school to show their friends. Neighbors stopped him in the street to say congratulations. For the first time in his life, Arif felt seen not just by his coworkers, but by his whole community. Still, he never let the attention change him. Continued living simply, walking to work each day, carrying his notebook and pencil. At home, he was the same quiet father and husband as before, helping his children with homework and telling them bedtime stories. Back at the factory, Mr. Hader saw a chance to improve things even more. He invested in new training materials, better tools, and more comfortable break areas. He asked the workers for their ideas about how to make the factory safer and more efficient. Everyone had something to say now, not just the loudest voices. People felt respected, and it showed in the quality of their work, but not everything was easy. There were still some tough days. Sometimes machines broke down in new ways that Arif had never seen before. Once a new weaving machine arrived from another country, and none of the manuals were in a language anyone understood. The workers felt nervous. Arif stayed up late for several nights, using his phone to translate the instructions, testing each part until he understood how it worked. He shared his notes with everyone, turning a scary new problem into a team project. There was another moment when the factory was nearly shut down by a surprise inspection. The inspectors wanted to see proof that the machines were being serviced and checked for safety. In the past, record-keeping had been poor, but now Arif's notebooks and careful logs saved the day. The inspectors were impressed, and the factory passed without any trouble. As the weeks went by, Arif's confidence grew. He became more comfortable teaching others. The older workers became his friends. They thanked him for his patience and sometimes even brought him small gifts like fresh bread or fruit from their gardens. One afternoon, as the sun set and the machines quieted down, Arif stood by the window, looking out at the city. He thought about how much had changed in such a short time. The joke from Mr. Hader had turned into a promise, and that promise had turned into something even bigger, a new sense of teamwork, respect, and hope in the factory. Arif knew there would always be new challenges, but he felt ready for them. He believed in his team, and he believed in himself. He'd learned that real strength is not just in your hands, but in your mind and in the way you treat other people. The factory was not just a place to work now. It was a place where people grew together, learned together, and faced the future as a family. And as the lights went out and the doors closed for the night, Arif smiled to himself, feeling proud of the small, quiet difference he had made in the world. As days turned into weeks, the atmosphere at the factory continued to improve. The memory of Arif's clever solution became a favorite story among the workers. People enjoyed telling the story to new employees, sharing how Arif had fixed the engine without even touching it, and how this small miracle had changed everything for the better. The old weaving machine, once known as the dinosaur, was now running smoother than it had in years. It seemed almost grateful for the care and attention it received. Arif's new role at the factory was different from before. Now, he was not just a machine operator. He was also a teacher, a helper, and a bridge between old and new ways of thinking. Every morning, before the machine started, he would gather a few workers near the control panels. Together, they would review the basics of machine care, safety, and troubleshooting. The sessions were never long or boring. Arif liked to keep things simple, showing his friends how to watch for warning signs and how to use the menus on the control panels. The older workers, who once felt left behind, were now the first to arrive for Arif's lessons. They realized that learning new things was not something to be ashamed of, but something to be proud of. They even started helping the younger workers, sharing their years of experience in fixing mechanical parts and teaching patience. Samir, the young man, who always had questions, became Arif's special helper. He learned quickly, taking notes, just like Arif used to do. Soon, Samir could solve small problems on his own. Sometimes Arif would watch him from a distance, feeling proud to see someone else growing in confidence and skill. One day, Mr. Hader came to the factory floor with an important announcement. He called everyone together and cleared his throat. "We have been chosen to test a new machine from the company's headquarters. It is faster, more powerful, and has the most advanced computer controls we have ever seen. The company trusts us because they heard about how we solved our last big problem. I know we can do it." The workers cheered. They felt ready. With Arif's help, they were no longer afraid of new technology or big changes. When the new machine arrived, it looked complicated and intimidating. The instruction manual was thick, and the computer screen was full of buttons and codes no one understood. Some workers felt nervous at first, but Arif calmed them. He said, "Every machine speaks. Just have to listen." Together, the team unpacked the machine, studied its controls, and slowly brought it to life. There were problems at first: strange error codes, unexpected stops, and even a false alarm that made the machine shut down. But instead of panicking, the workers worked as a team. They shared ideas, tested solutions, and learned together. Arif was always patient, guiding them gently, making sure everyone had a chance to try. After a week of teamwork, the new machine was running smoothly, just like the old one. Production increased, and the company was so impressed that they sent a letter of appreciation to the whole factory. Mr. Hader read the letter aloud, his voice full of pride. "We did this together," he said. "Let's remember how far we've come." Arif's story traveled beyond the city. Other factories wanted to know how one worker's patience and listening had made such a big difference. A television crew came one afternoon to film a short news piece. They interviewed Arif and his co-workers, showing their teamwork in the special way Arif taught others. For the first time, Arif saw himself on TV, standing beside the weaving machines he loved. His family watched with tears of joy, and his children clapped their hands, telling their friends, "That's our father." Despite all the attention, Arif remained humble. He still wore the same work clothes, carried his small notebook, and preferred listening to talking. At home, life was simple and happy. Arif liked to sit quietly in the evenings, sharing tea with his family and watching the sun set behind the rooftops. Sometimes his children would ask him, "Baba, how did you fix the machine without touching it?" Arif would smile and say, "You must listen first, then you will know what to do." One afternoon, a new problem arrived at the factory. The power flickered during a storm, and half the machines stopped working. The workers did not panic. Instead, they remembered Arif's lessons. They gathered in small teams, checking the machines. Step by step, listening for strange sounds and watching the control panels for clues. Within an hour, everything was working again. Mr. Hayter walked through the factory, smiling as he saw his team working together with confidence. This is what real success looks like, he thought. As time passed, the factory became famous for its teamwork and high quality. The company sent visitors to learn from Arif and his co-workers. They took pictures of the old weaving machine and listened to stories about the day everything changed. Arif always told them, machines are like people. They need respect, care, and someone who will listen. Arif's life was full. He made new friends, learned new things, and helped others grow. The workers now celebrated birthdays and special events together, often sharing stories and laughing about the past. On the anniversary of the day, a ref fixed the engine. The workers threw a small party. There was cake, music, and even a homemade medal for Arif, made from shiny buttons and a piece of ribbon. He laughed and thanked everyone, feeling happier than he ever had before. Through it all, Arif never stopped learning. He read books about new machines, watched videos, and asked questions whenever he didn't understand something. He encouraged everyone to do the same. Learning never stops, he would say. The world keeps changing, and so must we. One evening, as Arif walked home under the stars, he thought about the journey from the day of the broken engine to now. He remembered how nervous he felt at first, how he listened quietly, and how a simple joke from his boss turned into a moment that changed so many lives. Arif realized that every person, no matter how quiet or simple, could make a big difference. It only took patience, kindness, and the courage to do what others thought was impossible. At home, his wife welcomed him with a warm smile. "How was your day?" she asked. Arif sat with his family and shared the small joys: a solved problem, a worker's thanks, a new machine running smoothly. Life was not perfect, but it was good. In the end, Arif's story was not just about fixing an engine. It was about listening to machines, to people, to the world around him. It was about teamwork, respect, and the quiet strength that comes from believing in yourself and in others. The factory was now more than just a place to earn money. It was a place where people grew together, faced challenges, and celebrated each other's success. And so, every morning, as the sun rose over the city, Arif walked to the factory with a sense of purpose and hope. He knew that even the smallest act of patience and care could start a chain of good things, changing lives in ways no one could imagine. His story became a gentle reminder to all, sometimes. The best way to fix a problem is to listen first and then work together with open hearts and open minds to find the answer.